I'm going to stick with the excited theme and share that I'm very excited to get to have this sort of fireside chat here with my colleague Becky Dale. So I've been serving as co-chair for a sustainability working group for LA28 that brings together many community organizations and partners. And it's just been a thrill to have Becky at the helm. She's the vice president of sustainability at LA28, and so in that role, she's managing the development and execution of sustainability plans for the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games. I actually knew Becky back when she was at AEG, and so that experience that she's had implementing sustainability strategies with companies like Amazon and AEG has really positioned her to drive progress for more sustainable global scale events. So we're really lucky to have her here in Los Angeles and really excited to hear from you today. So we'll kick it off. LA28 has really made sustainability a priority since the bid. Can you walk us through some of the key initiatives and strategies that are in place to manage and minimize environmental impact while also delivering a world-class games?
Yeah, sure. Well, before I answer your question, I'm really excited to be here. So thank you, UCLA Anderson, for letting me go back to business school for 1 hour. I really miss it. It's a great time, so enjoy it. Yeah, so like you said, sustainability has been part of LA28 since the bid. We most crucially in how we built our games plan. So the whole foundation of LA28 is that we're using what's already here in LA, and we're very lucky to have a lot of world-class existing venues that we can lean on. UCLA, which will provide an excellent athletes village ready-made for the games, and it allows us to avoid building any new permanent venues. Which is, will be the first modern games to do that. So that's a pretty big milestone for the Olympic and Paralympic movements. But beyond that, part of my job since coming into LA28 has been to think about kind of what is our framework for sustainability beyond the venue plan. And so we've established kind of 3 key focus areas: radical reuse, climate action and resilience, and preserving natural resources. Radical reuse is really about embedding circularity throughout our operations. So of course that's the existing venues, but we're a temporary event. We're around a lot of planning, but then we're only around for a couple of weeks. So one of the most important things we can do from a sustainability perspective is ensure that all of the materials that we're using for the games have a second life. And so that's a huge focus for us. For the second area, climate action and resilience, that's really about how do we reduce the carbon footprint of the games. But then also, given the profile of the games, and given, all the great work that's already happening in LA around climate, how can the games serve as a catalyst to accelerate some of the climate solutions in the region? And then, third area, preserving natural resources, that's really about how are we responsibly managing our water use around the games, and then how are we protecting biodiversity throughout the games footprint.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll dig into some of these areas. So let's start with climate action and resilience. One of the big challenges around a mega event like the Olympic or Paralympic Games is really the carbon emissions. I know we've struggled with the working group thinking about what a baseline could be or how to compare. We don't really have, Paris is not, LA is not, but there is a lot we can do to reduce. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about those reduction efforts and what we're doing to tackle carbon emissions in the games?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a huge priority for LA28 and I think for every mega event because it is a significant impact. So, I think what I mentioned before, not to beat a dead horse, but the avoided construction is a huge part of our carbon reduction plan because historically, the construction of permanent venues is a huge part of that impact. So we have kind of a natural advantage there, which is great. But beyond that, what we're looking at is, what did Paris do? So Paris had a historically low carbon games. They met and actually exceeded their goal to reduce the total carbon emissions of the games by 50% compared to an average of the London and Rio Games, so recent additions. So they really pushed the envelope, and we were very lucky to get to work closely with their team and actually go to Paris this summer and see on the ground how they were operationalizing these carbon reductions. And so, at LA28, we're saying because, every time you host, you want to kind of like up the ante, and that's how it should be. So, we're working on strategies to ensure that for the construction and operations portion of the games, that we can reduce our carbon footprint relative to Paris. So that gets in kind of that baselining conversation you mentioned. So I think, beyond the construction piece, I would say two of the key areas that we're focused on are energy and transportation. For energy, one of the big focuses is relying on the grid, which may seem obvious, but, historically events have relied quite a bit on generators. And so, to the extent that we can minimize that temporary power presence and rely on the grid here in LA, that allows us to then purchase renewable energy and have a significant impact in reducing our carbon footprint. And then, where we do have temporary power, because we know that is going to be part of the solution, looking at some more innovative technologies like batteries that, again, help us reduce that reliance on generators and really get it to the bare minimum that we need operationally. And then on the transportation side, you guys have probably heard this, but part of our kind of core strategy dating back to the bid is to host a transit-first games. So we're committed to getting people out of their cars and bringing in some enhanced public transit, some additional buses to LA to help move people around during the games, because, even just operationally, it does not work to have everyone driving to all of these events that are happening simultaneously in the region. And so, our big challenge is how do we make public transportation the most attractive option for people coming to the games? Because ultimately, people are creatures of free will, but there are ways to create incentives and smooth the path so that we can make it, a more desirable option. And then I think kind of the other piece on the transportation side is around, zero emission vehicles and electrification. There's a big jump going from getting people driving individual cars to getting them into shared vehicles, but then looking at how are we maximizing the number of zero emission buses, zero emission vehicles that we're able to use.
Yeah, we just had a great conversation yesterday as part of UCLA Climate Action Day that was very research focused with the mayor's office and our Institute for Transportation Studies. And part of the conversation was really the way that the Olympics can be a catalyst for this kind of transformation and innovation, particularly in transportation. So actually, for UCLA, we'll be the athletes' village, but this is a very full circle moment for us because a lot of our sustainable transportation leadership began with the 1984 Olympic Games. And so there were major programs in what's called transportation demand management, or getting people out of their cars, that started back then, employee van pool programs. And there was also innovation that happened in LA's traffic control that was based on the 84 Olympics. So we're really excited to see what the 28 games will catalyze in terms of our transit systems and some of this technology innovation. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, one of the things LA28 has done is convened a council of local transit agencies, the Games Mobility Executive, that is working through what are the priority transit projects to get done before the games. And, it's less about, I would say it's less about what is needed for the games, but it's about these are investments that we know need to happen anyway. And so, again, how can the games be a catalyst to move these things forward faster? One of the things I like about 2028 is that, a lot of people have 2030 targets. 2028 is 2 years sooner. So let's get it done sooner.
Let's get it done, exactly. Here at UCLA, again, we have the Wilshire subway coming, and that was originally targeted for a later date and has been accelerated for the Olympics. So yeah, I really do think it can be a catalyst. And something I've appreciated working with LA28 is the focus on what does the city need, not just what do we need for the games, and how can LA28, support and move forward a lot of these initiatives. So coming back to this radical reuse and the no-build approach of the Olympics, which is really a radical approach. There have been so many Olympics that left venues behind that were not fully integrated into the city plans. So taking advantage of, venues like UCLA's housing to be the athletes' village or existing sports venues does have this huge impact on embodied carbon. But there are going to be some temporary structures and things built. Can you talk a little more about what sort of green building practices or practices you might be taking to manage within that area of materials?
I think, and we will have, we'll have both fully temporary venues, things like beach volleyball, where there's not a perennial, 10,000 seat beach volleyball stadium, as there probably shouldn't be in LA, to things what we call overlay. So that's like putting a temporary track into the Coliseum, which will be in its third Olympics when 2028 comes, but is obviously currently a football stadium. So not perfectly set up. A little bit of work has to be done. I think that, the main way we're thinking about it is through the circularity lens, because, bringing in, for example, grandstands or seating for these temporary venues, there is a rental market for that. If we can rely on these existing business models that ensure that these products are staying in circulation after the games, that's just a good kind of natural way for us to lean into private sector solutions that align well with circularity. I think that's a big piece of it, is the reuse. So it's looking at a combination of, rental, buyback, resale, and donation models to ensure, everything from the large infrastructure to some of the sports equipment. All of that stuff needs a home after the games. Paris did a really nice job on this. So, one of the things you may have seen on social media was they hosted a bunch of, this is not for like the building materials, more the sports equipment, but they hosted like flea markets after the games where they were selling excess volunteer uniforms and sport equipment and all of these things that were left over. It's an extra logistical effort to do it, but if you plan ahead and you're thinking about Second Life during the procurement phase, which is what we're doing, there's a huge opportunity to reduce the impact there. So we'll have strong commitments around ensuring reuse of as much material as possible.
I love that.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing that I would put in there is just, you mentioned embodied carbon. So also exploring, in the designs, how we can leverage lower embodied carbon materials where possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great. We have a number of students here from our Extension Sustainability Certificate Program, which is for professionals and coming from different industries. And this is such a real world example of what we talk about in the class in terms of life cycle impacts and, really thinking throughout the full life cycle of what you're working on and circularity and everything. Another thing we talk about in class when it comes to sustainability is that sustainability is more than the environmental impact. So we do think a lot about, immediately, energy, water, waste, and natural resources. You mentioned biodiversity, but there's also the social piece when we talk about the triple bottom line or those, 3 E's of sustainability. So how is LA28 thinking about that and the impact on local communities?
Yeah. So just to give context, so I'm the VP of Sustainability at LA28. I own kind of our environmental vertical. I sit next to and work fairly constantly with our VP of Impact, who owns kind of the social impact piece. But, what we see is just kind of a constant intersection. And it's interesting because having been in this field in a while, back when I was at AEG, that intersection wasn't happening as much. And so I think there's been a growing awareness, particularly when you look at environmental justice, for example, that the social and environmental are not separate and need to be thought about in an integrated way. So, one of the ways that we've worked on integrating this into our plans is, Nurit mentioned she's been on our working group. So we will release an impact and sustainability plan for the Games in the next few months that covers both social and environmental topics. We didn't want to do this in a vacuum. So we established a set of 3 working groups focused on sustainability, community business procurement, and local hire. And so those groups brought together academia, local NGOs, government, labor, a really diverse cross-section of leaders to advise us on our plans. And it's been really useful to have them help us look around corners. But part of that as well is bringing in a very LA perspective, helping incorporate an environmental justice perspective into our work. And so I think by bringing together a diverse group, that's helped us kind of kick the tires on our ideas and think about those impacts. And so, again, we'll be putting that plan out fairly soon. So more to share there. I would say, one particular area that's a big leverage point for us is procurement. So we have we have a multi-billion-dollar budget, obviously. We have a lot of things to buy between now and 2028. And so, one of our big opportunities for local impact is looking at how can we ensure a significant portion of those dollars go towards small and local businesses, and as well as diverse businesses. And so that's been a big focus in our procurement efforts is, screening for those criteria and ensuring that we're setting quantitative targets in those areas so that the benefits are showing up in the community from all of the spend around the games.
Yeah. Well, we are really hopeful that LA 28 will be a catalyst for change here in LA, but also globally. I think there's this real potential for what you're doing with sustainability in LA 28 to have ripple effects throughout future games. So beyond 2028, what are you hoping the legacy of your work will be within games more broadly in environmental and social impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have this unique platform for engagement and influence around the games. I would say where we're focused now is, because we are relying so heavily on existing venues, we don't have to wait until 2028 to start improving. And so, part of our role is bringing together all of the venues where we'll be hosting the games, many of which are already doing really great things around sustainability. So I don't want to suggest that this is all LA 28 coming in, but, the games, I think, add a certain oomph and, very extremely high profile event for these venues to want to put their best foot forward on a global stage. And so, later this year, we'll be bringing together all of our venues to share best practices around sustainability, to help kind of get that competitive spirit going among the venues. It's a great thing about the sports industry, everyone wants to win, including on sustainability. And then also, David alluded to this earlier, but this is California, and this is LA. So there's a lot of great incentive programs out there that some of these venues are already tapping into, but not everyone. And so connecting those dots between the venues and the utilities and other entities to help inspire this progress before 2028 so that by the time we get to the games, we've really raised the bar on sustainable operations in the venue community in LA. But that doesn't go away after the games. That stays on. And I think based on what I've seen previously, if we can kind of drive that change in LA, it's going to quickly percolate out throughout the country and through other sporting events. Because again, everyone's competitive and everyone wants to have the latest, greatest project, which is a great thing.
Absolutely. And even outside of the Olympics, LA is such a global city that the world really looks to, and what we do here definitely has these ripple effects. I know our audience has a lot of questions and we want to open that conversation up shortly, but I'm going to ask you one more question because we do have quite a few students here, both Anderson students, students from other UCLA graduate programs, and as I mentioned, some of our professionals. What advice do you have for them when they're trying to navigate sustainability careers or think about how they can get into the field?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my general advice when I talk to people about, career paths and sustainability is just go do something. So don't wait for the perfect opportunity or get too hung up on what exactly is it that I want to do? Find a job. There are a lot of jobs that you can tie into sustainability that may not have sustainability in the title.
Exactly.
Also, a very common path to getting into sustainability is to just get a job at a company and learn that company and then be able to move into the sustainability team. Because you may not be bringing the sustainability subject matter expertise, but you're bringing other expertise that can help round out that team. And so, I think just don't wait for what's perfect. Go for something, gain skills. Because there's a lot of transferable skills that are cross-functional. So, that would be my main advice is just get out there, try things. Don't get too hung up on one idea. I've never had a career plan. I've always just taken interesting opportunities as they've come up. Yeah. And interesting opportunities are where you learn and you become a more attractive candidate further on in your career. So, that's my advice.
I love that. Fantastic advice. Definitely, I would second that. Follow your curiosity. We already heard about all kinds of energy innovations happening. So think about what you love to do and find a way to plug that in to connect to sustainability. LA28 will be hiring. I'll plug for Becky. They do have 1 or 2 positions that are coming up. One's more specialized in carbon accounting, the other's more broad in sustainability, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, we have a great career resource on UCLA's sustainability site for students or others who want to kind of see what's out there, so encourage you to visit that. So I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience, and those will be coming in to me oh, look at that, they're already coming in. Okay, our students have been hard at work, so we'll dive right into audience questions. This is a good one. Somebody knows their stuff. So to what extent are these sustainability and circularity standards baked into LA28's agreements and contracts with your vendors, sponsors, et cetera?
That is a great question.
It is.
I would say we have generic language around sustainability and contracts that, for example, for all of our procurements, requires compliance with our responsible sourcing code. And so that kind of creates, I would say, like a broad-based floor around sustainability, and as well as topics like human rights that apply to everyone we do business with. But beyond that, we're involved, my team is involved with every RFP that we do. And so, when we're going through that process, we have sustainability and impact criteria and questions that are baked into every RFP. We rate those go into scoring and ultimately selecting any of our contracts. And then, we work during the contracting process to get any kind of specific sustainability requirements in for that category. So, like, for example, like we're in the process of awarding a bid for furniture for our new office. And so our big focus has been around sourcing secondhand furniture where possible, and then building in second life requirements into that contract. So that, when we get to 2029, we're not like, well, what do we do with all this stuff? It's already planned. So.
Yeah. And with that kind of second life, are you considering putting them towards schools, community centers, and disadvantaged communities? And
Yep. So we'll have a donation program that we build out. We haven't done that yet. It's a little early on in our planning, but yeah, absolutely. Donation will be a big part of it. And we want to ensure that we're showing up in disadvantaged communities and sending resources where they're needed most.
Excellent. Are you and how are you collaborating with sustainability leads for the other major global games that are happening in LA in the next few years?
Yeah. We're all connected. So, I know my counterpart over with the FIFA 2026 World Cup. And so, we are working together, and I very selfishly just like send her ideas of like, can you try this in 2026 so that we can see, what it looks like, and then try to do it at scale in 2028, which I'm sure she appreciates. But yeah, I would say the big, the World Cup will be at SoFi Stadium, which will also be a venue in 28. And so, there are opportunities there to look at how sustainability is progressing for that event, and then how we can kind of build on that in 2028. So, we're all connected. I think we all face similar opportunities and challenges. And so it's a lot of like sharing best practices. And I think you've either already found it or you will find it in your careers, that it's really helpful to find people who have similar objectives to you in other organizations, because you can kind of share like, how are you approaching it? How are you getting things done?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the incredible things about sports and the green sports world is just the power that athletes and sport has to reach such a broad audience. Mm-hmm. Do you plan on sort of leveraging that? Do you see the athletes having a role in sharing sustainable behavior, amplifying the sustainability message? Are those conversations happening?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's a huge opportunity. I will say at this stage where we are, we're a little bit more focused on the operational planning, and like in terms of sustainability communications, which will be a big focus. That's probably going to come a little bit later for us. So it's pretty early stage, but yeah, the athletes have an incredible platform. Also, on the flip side, if they don't like what you're doing, they will tell you about it, and they will tell millions of people via social media. So yeah. Athletes are a key stakeholder for us. across sustainability and just the games in general. And so I think it goes two ways. Like, this is largely a young group of people, many of whom are passionate about sustainability and want to, push these events and their leagues, et cetera, to do more. And so I think that's helpful to us, right? Yeah. That we have these key stakeholders who are ambitious and want to help move the needle forward on sustainability. At the same time, what I have learned is that world-class athletes also have, very defined ways of doing things. And so, one of the balances we have to strike is making sure that we're giving athletes a very high level of service, and then we're not doing anything that could potentially compromise their experience and their performance, because this is one of the most important, events of their lives. And so there are trade-offs there that we have to think through as well.
That makes perfect sense. When you talk about the legacy of the Olympics as a catalyst, we as a city, we have a lot of existing inequities, and that includes in transit and transportation. I know that transportation and the mobility is a whole nother section with, additional leadership, but can you speak at all to how LA 28 is hoping to address some of those inequities around the city?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I do think transportation is a big piece of it, but we already kind of covered that. I mean, I think another core area, and this is a bit outside of me directly, is around both procurement and hiring. And so, obviously the games will require a significant workforce. So how do we prepare for the games and leverage that to do some capacity building, some upskilling, and help people kind of develop career pathways through the games, and make sure that focus is on helping people in disadvantaged communities. So that's one piece of it. And then I think on the procurement side, again, it really is about making sure that just some of the economic, a significant portion of the economic benefit of the games goes to local businesses and minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and ensuring that those businesses are being given opportunities to participate.
Yeah. This being LA, there's a lot of questions related to transportation. So just staying on that for a moment, can you say anything about specific incentives or programs that you see that will help get people to ride transit at the games? Is there anything developed fully that you could talk about?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that's locked in at this stage. I would say what we talk about a lot is just making it a seamless experience. And there are a lot of different things that could be applied to make it a seamless experience. But, I would say, having someone who buys a ticket to the games, then having to go figure out how to buy a tap card and load it and use it, maybe not a seamless experience. And so that's kind of the do nothing scenario. And so we're looking at, integrations with ticketing and other opportunities that can help us improve upon that experience.
Definitely. I've also just seen that there's a lot to scroll here, so even more questions than I thought. It's good we still have a little time. Can you speak a bit more to the waste management efforts? Given the nature of a big event, how are you managing the waste that the games will create and reducing some of the environmental justice issues with that waste?
It's a great question. And, waste, for anyone who's worked in it, waste and management for events it's hard and it's extremely labor intensive. So there's not like a quick technological solution that makes it easy. So it's a big area of opportunity, but also a big challenge. One of the solutions that we're very interested in and that we're seeing a number of the venues in LA start to pilot and scale up right now is around reuse. The single best thing we can do is reduce our reliance on single-use containers. Now, given the scale of the games, that's not a total solution, most likely, but it's part of the solution. And so we're looking really closely at these reuse models at some of the a lot of the AEG venues in LA are doing this now to understand how they're working operationally. Operationally, how do you put it together? What's the financial aspect of it? Because often there is cost associated, and so that's kind of our starting point, is to say, how can we maximize reuse? We're also planning to encourage fans to bring in their own reusable water bottles to the games, so that people have the option and are encouraged to avoid single-use water bottles. So there's a couple different strategies that we're looking at, but on the back end, I would say it's source reduction up front, and then on the back end, we know we'll have landfill, recycling, and composting streams. Fortunately, in Southern California, that's available to us. That composting is broadly available and required. But it is tricky ensuring that those streams are clean, and that it's a combination of both the education piece on the front and getting the spectators to put things in the right place, and then also having mechanisms on the back end to potentially do even like manual sorting to get things to the condition that they need to be able to go to the right facilities. So it's a really tricky challenge.
Well, besides some of the plastics and things that you'll be working to avoid, another major source of waste can be food. And we have a few different questions here related to sustainability and food in the Olympics. Someone noted that Paris had a plant-based focus or pledge. Do we have any plans to go plant-based or at least make plant-based the default? What can you say about sustainability and food?
Yeah, I can say a little bit. Our head of food and beverage at LA28 started less than a month ago. And we have been all up in his business since he started because it's very important and we're very excited about it from a sustainability perspective. And fortunately, he's an incredible ally who is also excited about it. So, we're in the brainstorming stage and it's very early stage. We definitely want to promote plant-based options. We also want to look at how we're doing menu planning and inventory management just to reduce the amount that has to be procured and the amount that can be wasted. Not my personal area of expertise, but he has a lot of ideas around how we can be thoughtful about our menu planning just to reduce the amount that's being wasted, looking at food donation on the back end to ensure that food that is consumable and left over goes to people in need. And then, we're also looking at, sustainable sourcing as well. So we will put out a food vision for the games that details this in much more detail. So we're very much in the ideation stage right now, but it is a big focus because I think what I've seen being in kind of the sports and event space is that there's a lot of incredible work around sustainability that spectators don't necessarily see and feel. And the food and beverage experience, for most people, is their experience of sustainability at the games. It's what they're eating, it's any packaging that they have to dispose of and what that experience is like. And so it's really important to get that right.
Absolutely. Well, I know your selection of UCLA as the Athletes Village will certainly help with the athletes' food side. Yeah. We are #1 in dining, some Bruin pride in the room here. And very focused on, plant-forward menus and increasing our plant-based and sustainable spend. So that'll be great. We have a number of folks in the room who are from different businesses, and there was a question around, if businesses want to contribute to being a catalyst, to supporting the games. I know you're starting to engage with partners. What would you say to those in the room about how they can support and engage with LA28?
Yeah. Come find me after. But also, for our procurement process, because we do want to make these opportunities widely known and available, there's a platform called Ramp LA that we leverage to post many of our RFPs. That is, I'm going to mess this up if it's the city or the county, I'm not sure. But it is a pre-existing platform that's intended to, broadcast our procurement and give businesses an opportunity to engage. So I would say that's one path, is through the procurement process. Our procurement has not ramped up yet because, we're a pretty small operation. We're in planning mode right now. As we get closer to games, that procurement will start to increase significantly in 26, 27, 28. So more to come on that. And then, there's the other kind of path is, we have a number of commercial partners, corporate sponsors. And so that's another potential path to engage with the games as well.
Great. I know, we were talking about food issues, food insecurity, and we have a lot of vulnerable populations here in LA. We are in a housing crisis and really an unhoused crisis. And there were a couple questions around sort of vulnerable populations like that, are unhoused, street vendors. I know a lot of that falls to the city, but are you partnering with the city and working with City of LA on some of these issues around unhoused populations in LA or supporting street vendors?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll admit it's not one that I touch as closely in my role. What I can say is that like we're working arm in arm with the city. They're a key stakeholder for us. So we are constantly engaged with them on the games broadly, and that includes every issue in Los Angeles that is going to affect the game. So I don't have a concrete answer except to say that we work closely with the city and the county.
Excellent. There was a question submitted here about the cost of sustainability measures, which as a sustainability professional, I'm going to chime in too a little bit before I answer. It's not always more expensive is the answer. The question was how much more percent does it cost? Sometimes there are savings. Some of our initiatives that we do, especially around energy efficiency or reducing waste, can really have operational savings. So there's very much a myth that going green or being sustainable always has to cost more. But hopefully some of you who are Anderson students are learning in your courses that there is really a business case to be made for sustainability. I know you're not really at the procurement stage yet, but is there anything you want to add about what you see in terms of the cost impacts of sustainable choices?
Yeah, and I think it's both. There are a lot of measures that are savings, and those are pretty much efficiency based. So for example, I, from a sustainability perspective, I very much want us to have a rental first model for all of our temporary infrastructure because, that's kind of the most seamless way to guarantee that we're sourcing stuff that has been used before and will be used again. But I don't have to go tell our venues and infrastructure team that because they're going to do it anyway because it makes sense financially and operationally. So, when it comes to efficiency, I think a lot of it is built in. But, it's not true for everything, right? So there are, one example would be, in the food space, looking at sourcing certified food, that can come with a cost premium and often does. And so, I think we have to be in the areas where there is a cost. We just have to be thoughtful because, we can't do it for everything. And so we have to be strategic about what are our priorities, where can we make the spend and where can we not?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to pivot towards, we've been talking a lot about reducing impacts, including impacts on climate action, but some of the questions that have come in really hit the resilience side of the climate action and resilience commitment that LA 28 is making. So it's summer. It's getting hotter every year. What are you doing to prepare for heat? Are you working with the CMO, Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, or others on how to deal with extreme heat in LA?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, heat is top of mind. It was hot in Paris, and that does come with challenges, and we expect it will be hot in LA in July and August. So, I would say, we will develop a heat action plan. We've kind of started the early stages of that internally to look at what measures are we putting into place in our venues to ensure people have sufficient access to water, sufficient access to shade and cooling. So that's one piece of it that we look at kind of within the venue footprints that are directly, the areas that LA 28 is operating. But of course, people are going to be moving around the city much more broadly. And so it's actually, it's a much bigger challenge than LA 28 can solve on our own as an organizing committee. And so, we are talking to the city and the county as well, who are doing their own work. The county is working on their heat action plan now. And so looking at, how do we ensure that we're keeping the visitors who are coming to LA and the patrons of the games safe and healthy during the games from a heat perspective, but also how are we, supporting the work that the city and county are doing on these permanent changes that are making the city more heat resilient. And so I think it's both. It's kind of the narrow operational focus on what we can do within our footprint, but also the broader public sector engagement of what needs to happen in LA before 2028, and are there ways that we can help accelerate that?
Yeah, and that's a perfect kind of segue to our last question. We've talked a lot about how businesses might be able to engage as sponsors or vendors, and we talked about students and their careers, but what about just your average LA resident? How can people in LA contribute towards increasing sustainability as we move towards the 28 games and supporting the goals of LA 28?
That's a great question. Well, I'll take it in two parts. In terms of actually engaging with the games directly, which some of this will touch on sustainability and some of it won't. We will have a massive volunteer program in 2028. Some of those roles will touch on sustainability, and some of them will be more general games operations. But if you want to get involved in the games and you're in LA, becoming a volunteer is a great way to do it. You get a cool little kit that you get to wear that they had in Paris. So just one incentive, but you get to kind of be part of the excitement. But that's not specific to sustainability. I mean, I think I would say, like, I think it can sometimes be easy, especially in moments like right now, on sustainability, to kind of throw up your hands a little bit and say, you know, we need systemic change. Individual action is not enough. And I think we do need systemic change, but we also need individual action. It's both. And so I think it's really about looking at, like, how do you engage in your own community? There are tons of great nonprofits in the city doing incredible work around sustainability and building a more resilient city. So how do you show up with them, either, you know, going and working for them if you're looking for a job, you know, volunteering with them, you know, helping amplify their message, contributing financial resources. So I would say, you know, it's less about plugging into LA 28 has X that you can do. You know, we may come forward with that. We don't have that planned out right now. And it's more just saying, like, how can you invest hyper locally and, you know, drive that change, because all of that will obviously add up between now and 28.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think we all, you know many steps that we can take to be more sustainable. And ultimately, a conference like this is a big part of it, creating community, bringing people together for this conversation. So thank you so much to the Anderson students and Impact at Anderson and others who've supported this conference. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation. So let's give a round of applause to Becky.